The Red Wheelbarrow is a poem by American modernist poet and physician William Carlos Williams (1883–1963). The poem was originally published without a title and was designated as 22, as the 22nd work in Williams's 1923 book Spring and All, a hybrid collection which incorporated alternating selections of free verse poetry and prose. It is one of Williams's most frequently anthologized poems, and is considered a prime example of early 20th century imagism. William Carlos Williams, September 17, 1883 to March 4, 1963, was an American poet, writer, and physician closely associated with modernism and imagism. Modernist poetry refers to poetry written between 1890 and 1950 in the tradition of modernist literature, but the dates of the term depend upon a number of factors, including the nation of origin, the particular school in question, and the biases of the critic setting the dates. The critic poet C.H. Sisson observed in his essay Poetry and Sincerity that, modernity has been going on for a long time. Not within living memory has there ever been a day when young writers were not coming up, in a threat of iconoclasm.
Imagism was a movement in early 20th century Anglo-American poetry that favored precision of imagery and clear, sharp language. It is considered to be the first organized modernist literary movement in the English language. Imagism is sometimes viewed as a succession of creative moments, rather than a continuous or sustained period of development. The French academic René Taupin remarked that, it is more accurate to consider imagism not as a doctrine, nor even as a poetic school, but as the association of a few poets who were for a certain time in agreement on a small number of important principles. The pictorial style in which the poem is written owes much to the photographs of Alfred Stieglitz and the precisionist style of Charles Sheeler, an American photographer-painter whom Williams met shortly before composing the poem. The poem represents an early stage in Williams' development as a poet. It focuses on the objective representation of objects, in line with the Imagist philosophy that was 10 years old at the time of the poem's publication. The poem is written in a brief, haiku-like free verse form. The Red Wheelbarrow is an example of something called Imagist poetry, which focuses on using language to convey vivid, precise images to the reader. While this style might make Williams's poem seem pretty vague, the speaker's focus on the Red Wheelbarrow suggests that the poem could very well be a sentimental meditation on the use of common objects. There is a sense of wonder, and tenderness, even, as the speaker pauses to take stock of a common, simple item whose value people rarely notice or consider. Note how the speaker relays the scene with subtly increasing complexity. The wheelbarrow is not simply wet, but glazed with rain water. It is not just outside, but beside the white chickens. The continuous reframing of the wheelbarrow suggests that the speaker is encouraging the reader to look closer at the image at hand, and that there is more than meets the eye even when regarding something as mundane as a wheelbarrow. Much of the imagery is also described using gentle language. Again, the wheelbarrow is glazed with water, suggesting that the wheelbarrow is in the moment of quiet that so often follows a rainstorm. The wheelbarrow is wet, but not in a way that is overflowing with water. The chickens, too, are not noisy or flustered, as chickens are often depicted. Instead, they are simply white, with their color drawing the most attention and suggesting that the chickens, too, are quiet in this moment. Even the notion that so much depends upon the wheelbarrow is arguably a quieter assertion than it could be. If the speaker were to say something like, "My family depends upon," or "My life depends upon," a red wheelbarrow, rather than the vague, "so much," the poem might get tense. Suddenly, the identity of the speaker would infuse the poem with the sense of urgent individual needs, which would, essentially, decrease the value of the wheelbarrow in and of itself. Though the wheelbarrow and what depends upon it could be as vast as the whole of civilization, given that these tools have aided in farming and construction for a millennia, the language as it stands only ever softly suggests these things, rather than staunchly declares them. The poem's form, stretching a single sentence over several lines, reinforces its calm, meditative tone. It pushes the reader to slow down, to linger over the wheelbarrow in the same way the speaker does. The fact that the poem lacks punctuation and capitalization further suggests that the speaker is in a thoughtful and reflective state. If the speaker were to say, "So much depends upon the red wheelbarrow," the poem would feel much more urgent. Yet, the speaker is not necessarily evaluating the wheelbarrow's necessity so much as simply observing it. This observation, in turn, can be seen as a sentimental act in which the speaker regards an everyday object with a sort of reverence. While the red wheelbarrow is ultimately representative of the Imagist ideals in its focus on a specific image rather than narrative or lyricism, it can also be seen as a celebration or even simple acknowledgement of sentimentality. Perhaps there are more objects like the red wheelbarrow, it might suggest, that are also worthy of such tender regard. The wheelbarrow is an enduring and universal tool, used by people for thousands of years. It is most commonly associated with farming and construction, arguably, the foundation upon which civilization is built. In the poem, the wheelbarrow and its surrounding environment could also nod specifically towards agricultural workers and rural communities. As such, the poem's contemplation of the wheelbarrow can be read as a meditation on the link between humanity and the natural world, as well as an assertion of the importance of respecting the latter. While civilizations are often defined by their more complex features, such as a written language or social structure, farming and construction are the means that provide the survival of any society, i.e., through food. Thus, the wheelbarrow and its association with this kind of labor could represent the basic means upon which society is built. By extension, the wheelbarrow here might be taken to represent the value of the working class. This class, the people actually performing said manual labor, such as farmers, miners, construction workers, etc., is often stereotyped as being unskilled and unintelligent. Physical work, in general, is often misclassified as lowly or simple, which ignores the complexity that goes into planting, pollinating, etc. Seeing as this work is often undervalued despite its importance to human survival, the attention given to the wheelbarrow and, through it, the people who use wheelbarrows could act as a subtle acknowledgement and celebration of the working class. The wheelbarrow and its immediate surroundings, its outside, next to some chickens, could also allude specifically to agricultural workers and serve as an important reminder of the significance of farmers to society. Finally, the poem's outdoor setting could also speak to the value of society working in harmony with nature, rather than against it. What's more, the fact that the wheelbarrow isn't actually being used in the poem could represent the consequence of failing to appreciate the wheelbarrow and everything it represents. Note that the wheelbarrow is glazed with rain water, which indicates that it is at rest. Perhaps this is because it has recently rained, preventing the owner of the wheelbarrow from using it momentarily, or it could suggest that the wheelbarrow has been neglected for some time. Taken on a broad, symbolic level, the inactive wheelbarrow might represent the ways in which society takes laborers for granted and will only recognize their importance for the day-to-day functioning of society when they are not working, much like when trash collectors go on strike. And garbage begins to pile up because no one is taking it away. The state of the wheelbarrow might also suggest a rupture in humankind's relationship with nature itself, letting the tools that work the earth sit gathering water and rust. Throughout The Red Wheelbarrow, the speaker insists that the reader pay closer and closer attention to a simple image. The speaker begins by announcing the importance of the image before even describing it, stating that so much depends upon, and leaving the reader to briefly wonder what could be so important. The speaker continues the thought in the next stanza, answering the question, a red wheelbarrow, and then spends the last two stanzas of the poem describing the wheelbarrow's state and its surroundings in increasing detail. Beyond suggesting the importance of this specific image, the poem can also be interpreted as a meditation on the nature of perception in general. That is, the poem doesn't just seek to emphasize the value of this particular object, but also to reveal how quickly one's vision and understanding of the world can shift. Perception itself is thus presented as subjective and fallible, rather than an objective reflection of reality. The speaker purposefully and carefully breaks apart a single image, demonstrating its complexity by adding more detail in small bites. The scene itself is not remarkable at first glance. A wheelbarrow sitting outside is something many people have likely passed without a second thought. However, the speaker, in arguing that so much depends upon the red wheelbarrow, encourages the reader to look closer. And although the poem is only one sentence long, the speaker breaks the image of the wheelbarrow down into 6 different lines, forcing the image of the wheelbarrow to stay with the reader for longer than anticipated. It could be argued that, because of the speaker's insistence on the importance of the red wheelbarrow and the way the speaker continues to provide more and more details about the image, that perhaps the speaker intends to show the reader how to change and question their own perceptions. While the details are slight and may not seem important, they are significant enough to the speaker that, not only are they worth mentioning, but they are worthy enough to be the only thing mentioned. For what reason, the reader can't be sure. Perhaps it is because the wheelbarrow represents something much grander, like an entire community of overworked and undervalued farm workers, or it is because the wheelbarrow perhaps reminds the speaker of the value of simplicity. Either way, the speaker intends for the reader to challenge their initial perception of the wheelbarrow and the scene at hand, and thus to challenge the nature of perception itself.